Some say it was schizophrenia, others say she was poisoned. The fact is, she was born a princess, beautiful, intelligent, and incredibly wealthy, and was deeply loved, pampered, and well-educated. She fell in love and married the man she adored, becoming the first woman to govern Mexico. She later went completely mad and was locked away in a castle for over 50 years until her death. Get ready, because today, you'll learn the details of this woman's life. She was Charlotte of Belgium, the last Empress of Mexico. Charlotte was born on June 7, 1840, and was given the name Maria Charlotte Amelia Augustina Victoria Clementina Leopoldina, Princess of Belgium, later known as Carlota, Empress of Mexico. She was the youngest and only daughter among the 3 children of King Leopold I of Belgium and his second wife, Louise Marie of Orleans. Charlotte was also a first cousin of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and her husband, Prince Albert. She grew up in a loving environment, surrounded by luxuries and indulgences, and was her father's favorite. Their close relationship grew even stronger after her mother passed away when Charlotte was just 10 years old. Leopold I had big plans for his daughter and provided her with the same education as his sons, unusual for the time. He hoped to marry her to a prince from a European royal house, nothing less would do for his daughter. Charlotte was raised to rule, studying politics, geography, philosophy, history, music, and art. She spoke several languages, French, German, English, and Italian, and as an adult, learned Spanish. She was always an intelligent, diligent, and mature child. Like her father, she dreamed of becoming a queen or empress one day and prepared herself meticulously. Her personality was strong, determined, resolute, and highly disciplined. By the time she turned 16, Charlotte had become a stunning young woman, and suitors soon began to appear. One of them was Pedro V of Portugal, but she wasn't interested in him. She was instead drawn to a young Austrian archduke, blonde, blue-eyed, very charming, cheerful, and attentive, named Maximilian of Habsburg, the brother of Emperor Franz Joseph. Maximilian, a 24-year-old bachelor, visited the Belgian court in 1856, following his brother's advice, as the emperor thought it was high time for him to marry. The plan worked. Charlotte fell in love with him and told her father she wanted to marry Maximilian. King Leopold liked the Archduke, but there was a problem: Maximilian was not the direct heir to the throne. However, Charlotte, deeply in love, insisted that she wanted to marry him. The king agreed, and the two became engaged, marrying on July 27, 1857. There was a grand celebration, but neither the Emperor of Austria, the groom's brother, nor the Empress attended, as they had lost their daughter Sophia, only 2 years old, just months prior, and were still in mourning. This union deeply pleased Archduchess Sophia, Maximilian's mother, who continually praised Charlotte's beauty, elegance, and refinement. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law shared an excellent relationship, unlike the relationship Sophia had with her other daughter-in-law and niece, Empress Sissi. Sophia considered Sissi to be the complete opposite of Charlotte and would endlessly praise Charlotte in Sissi's presence. Many believe these compliments were intended to make the Empress uncomfortable, causing the two sisters-in-law to feel little affection for one another. It's known that Charlotte was very jealous of Sissi, as Sissi had a long-standing friendship with Maximilian. Moreover, Sissi gave birth to the much-desired heir in 1858, while Charlotte, who had already been married for over a year, still could not conceive. It's said that the main reason for the tension between them was that Sissi was Empress of the Great Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Charlotte considered her unworthy of this role, seeing her as unserious. Charlotte, on the other hand, felt she was well prepared to be a great empress, but was not destined for anything similar, as neither she nor her husband, Maximilian, was first in the line of succession of any ruling house in Europe. Pressured by King Leopold I, Emperor Franz Joseph appointed his brother Maximilian as viceroy of the Kingdom of Lombardy-Venetia, and the couple moved to Italy. However, it was a symbolic position. They did not truly govern, nor did they have full decision-making authority. Charlotte soon discovered that her dear Maximilian was not as in love with her as she had thought. Maximilian had married Charlotte primarily because he was heavily in debt, and he used the dowry money to pay off his debts and complete the construction of Miramare Castle. The situation for Charlotte was even worse, as Maximilian remained in love with another, Maria Amelia, a Brazilian princess who had passed away years earlier. He could not forget her and even took Charlotte to Madeira, where he and Maria Amelia had shared idyllic moments. Maximilian did not hide his love for Maria Amelia, which must have been painful for Charlotte, who tried to appear happy beside her husband. Despite everything, the couple got along and lived in harmony while they were in Italy. Many letters between them reveal affectionate words, and they complimented each other. Charlotte was determined and strong-willed, while Maximilian was more sensitive and dreamy. In 1859, the situation in Italy became more complicated, and, during the Battle of Solferino, Austria lost the Kingdom of Lombardy-Venetia. The couple then moved to Miramare Castle. Maximilian and Charlotte withdrew from public life, but as the months passed, boredom set in. They were unable to have children and had no functions or duties. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Mexico was going through a very turbulent period. In 1861, then-President Benito Juárez announced the suspension of foreign debt payments. The country was completely ruined after 3 years of the Reform War and could not pay its foreign creditors. France, the United Kingdom, and Spain then formed an alliance and sent an armed expedition, which landed at the port of Veracruz in January 1862 to pressure Mexico. Negotiations took place, and Benito Juárez assured that he would soon pay the debt. Thus, Spain and the United Kingdom withdrew their troops. However, France, governed by Napoleon III, who aspired to create a colonial empire in the Americas, took advantage of the situation to announce that it would occupy the country. His intention was to establish a monarchy in Mexico, among other reasons, to reduce the power of the United States in the region. With thousands of soldiers, France invaded Mexico and finally managed to occupy Mexico City in June 1863. Mexican conservatives and the Catholic Church, who desired a Catholic monarchy, reached an agreement with Napoleon III. Only a European prince was needed to fill the newly created position of Emperor of Mexico. Napoleon III thought of Maximilian and, along with Mexican conservatives, sent a delegation to Europe to offer the Archduke the title of Emperor of Mexico, for him and his descendants. From the beginning, Maximilian was suspicious and not very interested in accepting the offer. His brother, Emperor Franz Joseph, and his mother, Archduchess Sophia, did not view this sudden, beautifully presented offer favorably. And they were right. Napoleon III had concealed that the country was in ruins and mired in a bloody civil war between conservatives and liberals. Furthermore, he forged a fake plebiscite to convince Maximilian that the people eagerly desired an emperor in Mexico. Everyone was suspicious, except for Charlotte. The idea of becoming empress of such a large, beautiful, and sunny country convinced her that this was her great opportunity to rule. She quickly began to persuade her husband to accept the offer, while her brother, mother, and even her friend Sisai advised him to refuse. Franz Joseph even stated that if Maximilian accepted this offer, he would have to renounce his succession rights to the Austrian throne. Charlotte insisted until she convinced her husband, and Maximilian finally accepted the crown of Mexico. The couple departed on April 14, 1864, on the frigate Nevera and arrived at the port of Veracruz on May 28, 1864, thinking they would be received with celebration and a warm welcome. However, the opposite happened. The people were not there to receive them, and at that moment, they began to realize they had been deceived. they settled in Chapultepec Castle, in Mexico City. The couple was disappointed when they discovered the country's true situation, but they were very enthusiastic and soon began making decisions and leading the country. However, despite the fact that conservatives and the Catholic Church had placed them in power, the new emperors were liberal and progressive. Their policies to improve the lives of the people clashed with the interests of those who had enthroned them. They confronted the Catholic Church by ratifying laws that deprived it of its assets, recognized reformist legislation, and even invited Benito Juárez to be part of the government. However, he rejected the position and refused any agreements or dialogues with the new emperors, as he was the president of Mexico and considered the invitation an insult. Maximilian and Charlotte took advantage of the great power they had to promote the country's economic and social development. Justice and the well-being of all were their most important goals. One of Maximilian's first acts as emperor was to limit working hours and abolish child labor. He cancelled all debts of peasants that exceeded 100 pesos, restored communal property, and prohibited any form of corporal punishment, as at that time, large landowners and estate owners had complete freedom to imprison or even torture workers with hot iron or whips. Maximilian traveled throughout the country to understand its true situation, leaving his wife, now Empress Carlota, as regent. Thus, she became the first woman to actually govern Mexico. Empress Carlota took several measures to bring modernity to the country, such as the construction of railroads for steam transportation and the installation of telegraphs. She also devoted herself to charity, promoted the arts by founding a conservatory of music and a painting school, opened daycare centers and asylums, and enacted a public schooling law that guaranteed free, mandatory primary education for all. However, Maximilian soon found new lovers, which naturally bothered Carlota, who until then had not managed to become pregnant and felt pressured to provide an heir. To this day, it is uncertain why Carlota never became pregnant. Maximilian resolved the issue of succession by adopting Agustin and Salvador, grandchildren of Mexico's first emperor, Agustin de Iturbide. Carlota accepted the decision, and the couple began sleeping apart. According to some historians, this was a relief for her, as Maximilian had contracted syphilis, and many believe he even transmitted the disease to her. The new emperors of Mexico were good rulers and genuinely concerned for the people. However, as their policies clashed with the interests of those who had put them in power, they lost conservative support, while liberal Republicans continued to fight to end the monarchy. The situation of the emperors grew increasingly complicated. Napoleon III's French troops could not control the Republican guerrillas, and with the end of the American Civil War, the United States decided to support Benito Juárez and the Republicans. Thus, Napoleon III broke the agreement with Maximilian and began to withdraw his armies from Mexico, sending them back to Europe as he anticipated an imminent war with Prussia. Maximilian and Carlota were left without any support, neither French, conservative, nor liberal. He wrote a letter to his mother, saying he was going to abdicate the throne, but the Archduchess replied, "A Habsburg never abdicates." Carlota, who was already beginning to show signs of madness, forbade her husband from abdicating, stating that only the old and weak abdicate, not a 34-year-old man full of life and with a great future ahead. Maximilian, deeply shaken by the situation, remained in Mexico, even knowing his cause was completely lost. Carlota, determined, traveled on July 9, 1866, to Europe in search of military and economic aid to save the empire and her husband. Napoleon III knew she was on her way, as she had notified him by telegram. However, on the day of her arrival, there was no one to receive her, and when she arrived in Paris, she had to stay in a hotel instead of the royal palace, as Napoleon III made various excuses not to meet her. She arrives at the palace and demands to speak with the French emperor, who, in response to her request, shows indifference, indicating that he can no longer do anything for Maximilian or for Mexico. "Not one more man and not one more franc," says Napoleon III to a completely out-of-control Charlotte. She becomes hysterical at the emperor's excuses. Empress Eugenie of Montijo offers Charlotte some juice, but when she sees the drink, she refuses to take it and accuses them directly of wanting to poison her. Charlotte then goes to Rome to meet Pope Pius IX, seeking his help to pressure Catholic princes to support Maximilian, something the Pope would not do. She arrives in the presence of the pontiff already very unstable, constantly biting a handkerchief, having convulsions, and speaking incoherently, mixing several languages. The Pope manages to understand that she is very afraid of those who accompany her, convinced that they want to kill her, and that Napoleon III and Empress Eugenie have poisoned her. At that moment, she sticks her finger down her throat, trying to vomit the poison she claims was given to her. The Pope is astonished by Charlotte's condition, and with great difficulty, they manage to remove her from the Vatican. She refuses to eat, suspecting that everything is poisoned, and also refuses to sleep, afraid of being murdered while she rests. The next day, Charlotte returns to the Vatican and demands another audience with the Pope. She causes a scene, and they take her immediately to him, who was at that moment having breakfast. When Charlotte sees the remains of the Pope's breakfast, she advances towards them and eats everything she can, knowing that this food is not poisoned. Charlotte's paranoia only grows, she neither eats nor drinks anything offered to her. She even began drinking water from the Roman fountains and spent some time eating fruits she picked from trees herself. Meanwhile, in Mexico, Maximilian was defeated and captured by the Republican army in the city of Querétaro. After a trial, he was executed on June 19, 1867. The news was devastating for Charlotte, who fell into a deep depression. It is said that it was at this moment she finally went completely mad. It is not certain what ultimately caused her to lose all mental stability. Her brother, Prince Philippe, Count of Flanders, took responsibility for her care and ordered that she be examined by doctors, who declared her insane. From then on, Charlotte would spend the rest of her life in seclusion, first in her castle in Miramar, in a room that was fully barred, where she received the typical treatments of the time for madness. She was then transferred to the castle of Tervuren and finally to the Château de Bouchout, in Belgium. Charlotte spent over 50 years enclosed in these castles, and her mental health never recovered. Over time, she lost her fear of being poisoned but still demanded that her food be prepared in front of her. She spoke to herself, addressed Maximilian as if he were still alive, and often referred to herself, Empress Charlotte, in the third person. She died of pneumonia in 1927, at the age of 86, 60 years after her husband's execution. There is a theory that Charlotte's mental decline was caused by a healer in Mexico City. Desperate to provide an heir for the empire, Charlotte reportedly sought out this healer in search of a remedy for her infertility. Disguised and hiding her true identity, she was recognized by the healer, who was a supporter of Benito Juárez and, with the intention of harming her, allegedly gave Charlotte a high dose of tiananacatl, a psychoactive mushroom used as a tonic in very diluted solutions, but which in high concentrations could permanently alter the mind, driving a person to madness. On her deathbed, according to some sources, her last words were, "All of that ended in failure. I hope in God we are remembered with sorrow, but without hatred." Charlotte is buried in the royal crypt, where former Belgian monarchs rest.